Hi there and welcome to Spirit Primer. My name is Kim Thompson. And here at Spirit Primer, what I do is I try to make sense out of, spirit, consciousness, energy, really anything having to do with raising the collective vibration. And the more you look into this kind of work, the more you look into this sort of stuff, you'll find out, as I have, that really this is all about raising our vibration. I did want to share with our viewers that Peter's cat will probably show up.
She probably will.
So don't be surprised, and my dog will probably bark, and that's just the way we do things here at Spirit Primer. So today, specifically, I'm talking with Peter Rogan of Your DNA Awakening, and I'm going to ask him some questions about what DNA activation actually is. In the spirit of full disclosure, I have worked with Peter. We had a 5-session series, and I would say, I'm doing a lot of work, so I can't completely determine what's having which effect. But since I've done the work with Peter, I have really just felt so much more in some sort of alignment with something that's really groovy, is the best way I could put it. And one particular session I had was really intense, where I actually felt a really intense release of, just felt gunky. And then the sort of subsequent weeks I had continued to have some release, and since I've been on the other side of that, I felt really, really good. So without further ado, I want to introduce my friend and DNA activator, Peter Rogan. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Kim.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really wonderful to be here.
Hey, so we get to this pretty quick. I want to ask you to tell us, and I think it's such a great story, about how you came to this kind of work. I know that you weren't really necessarily a member of the hippie set, and it wasn't necessarily something your parents had sort of dreamed for you.
For sure. And, I started out mostly in math and science and teaching and tutoring a lot of math at the high school level for many years, kind of right after I graduated from college, the first time with my degree in English. And then more recently I got back into school, and I went and just completed another bachelor's in physics. And in the middle of that degree, I started accessing a DNA activator. And this guy named Steve in New York City, Steve Fulop, who's just a wonderful friend and an amazing DNA activator. And so I started accessing this work, while I was going through school, and it was really opening me up and really clearing me out of a lot of, low-level problems that I had been dealing with through my whole life, that had been hampering me for a long time. And I had been seeing a therapist at that point. Had kind of gotten to the point with some of my internal stuff that it was enough of a nuisance that I was really kind of seeking out help. And even, before I found Steve, I thought I was going to go down to Peru and maybe participate in some ayahuasca. And I was basically just on a big healing mission. And I kind of understood that there was, some healing on this planet that was going to be very helpful for me, and I was really determined to start accessing it. And when I opened that channel up, of course, through the healer that was in my highest good, kind of came down the pipes for me. And so I had been accessing the work and feeling really good and really cleared out. And then it was at a certain point when I accessed some certain really higher level DNA activations that really shifted things and really grounded in my understanding as an energetic being and my ability to be facilitating this work. Sort of came grounded into me. And then after I graduated, instead of going on to my master's or maybe my PhD, both of those are pretty daunting things in physics, I had the big, intense, tough conversation with my parents, where there was screaming and crying, and, it was a big thing to hear their son's not going to go on in physics. He's going to start to do, energy work. Not even energy work, something called DNA activation, which can just sound so hooby-jooby to a lot of people. And so, I took a really big turn after I graduated, away from what I had put a lot of time and money and effort into. It's hard at the end of 2 years of grinding against physics classes and $25,000 to say, okay, well, that wasn't the direction that I'm going to keep going in. And that I always say I wouldn't be here facilitating this work without first having the work done on me. Because, the work really changes your ability to start living a life in line with your higher self-will and less in line with your lower self-will, so to speak.
Very cool. And I've heard other people say this in other interviews, but as you're speaking, I can actually, I'm feeling a higher level energy. And it's
Sure.
So this stuff is real. That's why I want to get out and talk about it, because it's real. But would you say that your work in physics really, sort of ties together with the DNA activation? I mean, it seems like it goes hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. And that I think that it will continue to come together more and more. And physics, hard science physics right now is offering us a lot of open doors, so to speak, that are not restricting what people are saying they're doing sort of to each other on a quantum level, so to speak. And I don't know if I should take this time to dive a little bit into maybe some of the physics behind what I understand as DNA activation. But the idea that we live in this universe that's kind of a dual nature of the matter here, meaning that things exist as a particle or a wave. And it's very just commonly referred to as the dual nature of matter. And also, light, light from the sun travels as a wave through space until it hits, say, a particle in a cloud. And then that waveform that's spread out all the way from the Earth to the sun instantly collapses into a point charge that we call a photon. Those are the particles, the packets of light energy that we can use. So light, as well, is also either a wave or it's a particle. And what we can't do is we can't ever create experiments where we're treating light like a wave and like a particle. We have to pick one side of the coin, so to speak, and then we can conduct experiments with that side of the coin, and they work incredibly well. So we can choose to treat light as a photon, as a particle, and we can create, hard science experiments that all run along just great. Or we can treat light like a wave, and we can create experiments where we're treating light like a wave and it works great. We cannot create experiments where those two are brought together. And it goes, a little bit into the idea of quantum mechanics. And the idea that, we can't quite know everything there is to know about a system. And that, quantum mechanics and Newtonian physics have not gotten pulled together on the hard science level yet. And, the idea that in quantum mechanics we're fundamentally restricted by what we can know because of kind of the size of what we're dealing with. And it's this thing called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And I'm maybe not going to go too much into that right now because it might just be a little bit too technical.
It's already too much for me, by the way.
Sure. And in terms of DNA activation and where this starts to come in, is the idea that we're doing experiments with the double helix DNA in labs that are producing very interesting results. And this is something called the phantom DNA effect that you can go check out and read, very easily and find credible sources. And the idea that we can take a double helix DNA strand and we can put it into a vacuum. And then we can add photons into that vacuum, light particles. And the photons all align up and take the shape of the DNA strand. And when we remove the DNA strand, the photons stay held in the same shape as the DNA, even without the DNA strand being there. And again, that's called the phantom DNA effect. And what it tells us is that light exchanges information with DNA.
Okay.
And so DNA is sort of like the receptors in our body that understand quantum wave type information. DNA is also heralded as the building blocks of life. So it's sort of that piece within us that can absorb and understand wave quantum encoded information and then enacts particle changes within people.
And that's what you're doing, is processing these codes.
Yes, exactly. And that when I would do what would be called a DNA activation, on a simpler level, it could be,
Peter went hiking just before he got here.
Yeah, I just got back from a hike 2 seconds ago.
Go ahead and give yourself a wipe down. It's okay.
The sun's like kind of beating
I
right
know.
on.
I'm sweating too. I'm bitching too.
And so the idea is that I bring really high frequency light encoded information into somebody's energy system and body system. And this is much higher frequency energy than we're used to engaging with in our bodies. And, there's a reason we go through clearings before we start activating people.
Okay.
Because the idea is that when you bring this really high frequency into somebody's system, their whole body is going to adjust up to that level. And that can be slightly uncomfortable sometimes. Just as any sort of transition into a different state, it's kind of the idea that you're not going to have somebody go run a marathon before they've trained a little bit. And so you're not going to start bringing this really high frequency energy into people until they're cleared out enough to begin absorbing that in a healthy, joyful way. Because there's kind of two sides to this work. One is that as you're clearing people out and activating people, their energy is flowing in a much more high frequency state. They just feel better in their head. They have more energy and more clarity. And then the other side is that we're manifestors of our reality. And so distortions within our field show up in our life as problems. And so when you start to put people through these clearings, they start to manifest in a life free of those distortions. And those distortions can show up and manifest as jobs that people don't like, relationships that are suffocating people, friends that aren't in people's highest good, habits that aren't in people's highest good. Those are all manifested in line with our blockages. And then especially then as you start activating and bringing in really high frequency, well, people then begin attracting in a new higher frequency grid of people, places, and things into their lives. And again, it's that whole thing where without this work having been done on me first, I would have just stayed rolling along in my blockage-filled life, which, a degree in physics for some people doesn't seem like a blockage-filled life, but for me it was still something in line with a 3D fear-based, unsure of my future paradigm, right? That I was kind of just doing because it was like something that satisfied my ego, satisfied my whole family, because there's a lot of pressure to live how you're supposed to live from everyone around you and the society and the culture. And it's much easier to go hang out and talk about how I have a PhD in physics.
Yeah.
That really lights people up. People love that, and then to go and having to start bring in information that pushes on people's paradigms of understanding of this world is a very difficult thing to do, and it's not the most easy path, to take, is to sort of take this on, to sort of step out into your role to be helping, Earth shift.
Right. Did you feel like you had a choice? For me, this is stepping outside of my comfort zone, although I have to say that since I've done the work with you, I feel much more comfortable with this hat that I'm choosing to wear. But it's almost like I don't have a choice. Of course I have a choice, but I just can't make another choice. Did it sort of feel like that to you?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that phone call that I made to my parents to was almost like an intense need to go do that. But it was also very freeing because, I remember thinking at one point, my parents are incredibly loving, they're supportive. I have an incredibly close relationship with my parents. My mom is very supportive and into the work. My dad is not into the work, but he's very supportive and very connected and loving. And that I always thought that there was going to be just a side of me, like a piece of me, that my parents were just never going to understand or know. I was just kind of resigned to that. I was like, well, it's just going to be way too hard to help them figure that out about me. You know, that like really secret, special place in me that was always kind of driving me. You know, I think probably, you know, drove me in physics. It drove me in music before that. You know, just an intense desire to kind of create and be engaged in something really special was always very heavy in my field. And was always something I just thought was just going to go kind of tamped down, you know, which is what happens for most people. And the idea that, you know, activating people is completely different for each person. Because it's the idea that each person already has sort of missions and gifts that they're here to be spreading. And that as you get more in touch and more high frequency and you start to manifest in a life not in line with your blockages, well, you start to manifest in a life that's your highest good. And so kind of activating each people kind of sends them off, not into the same thing, all off into their different highest good reasons for incarnating here.
Cool. Excellent. So let's see here. I think I've got a few questions that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you specifically. So we've talked about what the actual activation is. Can you tell me or explain easily how that relates to spirit? How is it touch spirituality and all that is?
Absolutely, and I would say that each, you know, activation is designed, you know, with those first initial activations, you know, because there's a lot that can be done with this work in terms of very specific energy exchanges, but that, you know, those initial DNA activations or DNA awakenings or whatever you want to call them could be thought of a lot as an initiation, and that these initiations have been on this planet forever. They usually just get handed down in really secret ancient ways in like the Vedic yogi traditions in India, from guru to master. And, you know, maybe if you studied for 15 years under a master, he might give you an activation, right? He might awaken you to some higher divine consciousness. And that, you know, it's done through somebody who has that frequency in their field, and then you're tuning them to that frequency. And that, as far as how that would relate to spirit, that, you know, the first activation that I do would clear out all blockages in your lower self, in your 3D incarnate self. And then you kind of have higher levels of yourself that we typically generally just call the higher self. It's a big overarching term. But the idea is that our higher self is sort of composed of different levels. And that the second, you know, activation that I would do would start to clear out any distortions and ground in your soul identity. So we all understand a soul identity is kind of one step higher than us. It's still individuated, an individuated identity, right? And so that's kind of the next step above our 3D incarnate would be our soul identity. And so as you would activate that frequency within people, they would just be more in touch with their soul's will. And that, again, your life would start to reflect more soul encounters, soul experiences, soul relationships, right? And that even above that, we would start to activate and bring in what's called your oversoul identity. And so your oversoul identity is a soul identity that's shared with everybody. And so, as you can imagine, when you start to ground those frequencies and that consciousness inside somebody, well, they start to engage in real feelings of unity. You know, not just talked about unity, but real unity, right? Because you're then grounding in levels where you are sharing something. And then even above that, we could start grounding in, you know, simply what could be called people's avatar identity. And you know, so you hear about, you know, things like a Christos avatar identity, and that you hear about living avatars and avatars of the past. And that those were, again, humans like us who had grounded in fully those identities of themselves. Jesus, Buddha, the 21 Buddhas before Jesus, who Jesus was a part of their lineage, just a westernized version of it. And that, we're in a time where rather than having one avatar incarnated at a time on this planet, we're moving into a time through this shift where we're going to have dozens and hundreds and thousands of people grounding in those levels of themselves.
And why is that? Why now?
There's natural cycles of Earth that are happening, and in terms of, there's a lot of talk about a 26,000 year cycle that we're kind of at the pinnacle of, and there was all that hullabaloo about the Mayan calendar ending, right, in 2012. And that there was a lot to that, that didn't just come out of some surface Americanized doomsday thing, that was all very tied in stuff to a lot of cycles that were going on. And that normally all planets, all life everywhere is going through these ascension cycles. They're shifting in frequency. And normally Earth rolls right along through these frequency shifts. But what happened is that we have way too much darkness and density on this planet to be shifting the higher vibrations of unconditional love and joy and unity. It just wasn't going to happen. And so it's even the idea that me sitting here saying I can clear out some of your low-level blockages and start to activate you is a somewhat unnatural thing that we're needing to do. And that we're kind of coming in here and manually helping, as best as we all know how, to be helping people open up to these frequencies of unconditional love and unity that are kind of bombarding the planet. And the people that are not able to shift into those frequencies are maybe going to have a difficult time with this transition. If you're stuck in low-level vibrational states of fear and hate and anger, it's going to be a scary thing as the world moves into unconditional love and joy and unity, right? That'll be a very scary thing for a lot of people. And then, some people, again, that we all, this is a very distorted place. And most people, especially in America, are not meditating for 3 hours a day, let alone 3 hours a month, right? And so we're not doing a lot of intense internal work by ourselves. And that, you probably could start meditating for 6 hours a day for the next 6 months, and you would probably have cleared yourself out enough to be ready to start activating DNA. But that's a very high price to pay that not many people that I'm aware of, especially here in America, are able to go put that time in like that. And that accessing a facilitator is a very hyper accelerated way to states of enlightenment. And that, you read about those states of enlightenment, and you read about people meditating in the East, and you're like, well, that's a nice dream, but I'm here in America with my job, my family, my kids. And so this is a way for people to be not dropping out of their lives, and then also quickly pulling themselves up spiritually and energetically. And, I think I've made the analogy to you that, this work is kind of like getting airlifted into spirituality, right? And there's certain people that don't even want that. Certain people, I compare it to, people are like, well, why would you take a plane to Montana when you can just walk to Montana? Well, sure. So for the people that are looking to really struggle and walk to Montana, and they want to go through that experience of struggling through every single step, that path is there, and then there's a lot of support on that path, and there's a lot of people on that path, and if that path is what calls you, that's a wonderful path. If you're desiring to just take a plane to Montana and get on with your life there, then this work is probably going to be very valuable for you. if you're wanting to stay living your life, right, with families and jobs and experiences and resumes and, everything, and then also be quickly pushing yourself up to the highest energetic frequency levels that we have on this planet, then, this work, from my perspective, there's nothing more powerful or helpful.
And I think the thing that I want people to understand is that there's a reason why, and you've touched on it, that the planet and the cosmos, there is this change in frequency that's happening, whether we want to believe it or not. It's
Sure.
happening. And I've read too much to believe that these people are all, this is some sort of weird conspiracy that they're all going to talk about it. There's just thousands of people out there talking about it and educating about it. And so it's really whether we want to go along for the ride or not. And I'm always one of these people, I don't want to get left behind. I did sort of get caught up in the December 21st hullabaloo. It's actually what got me here, because I didn't want to be left behind. I had a sense that, and especially I don't want to be left behind when the carrot is love and unity.
Yeah. Sure.
It's almost hard to fathom, I think, and still in my 3D place, it's almost hard to really fathom what that would be like to live in that world that I'm certainly interested in helping to create it, if it's at all a possibility. So I also want to say that, I didn't just do the 5 sessions with you and then, keep smoking my pot.
Sure.
I'm doing meditating and I'm cleaning up my diet and I'm sleeping right and I did start to exercise. So I'm doing a lot of other work that supports this, but I do believe that it is this sort of compressed action that has allowed me to feel as good as I do today. So I'm excited. Do you want to, I forgot to ask you, are you demonstrating anything? No pressure, but are you demonstrating?
I can.
If you want.
You mean in terms of, I could facilitate a little clearing here for people who are...
Sure.
Yes, I absolutely can.
That'd be great.
And so you're interested in me doing that right now?
Yeah, if you're into it.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
And so, so since Kim brought up this opportunity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now facilitate an aura clearing for everybody who would ever be watching the recording of this. And after I do this, I'll start talking a little bit more about how that's even possible. Cool. Because this work could be weird enough when you're accessing it live one-on-one, and then even another step of belief further sometimes for people, the idea that you can be getting it through recordings. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through this, and then I'll talk about it as this clearing's happening on people.
Cool. Thank you. So
I'm going to connect to the higher self of everyone watching this recording and anyone who ever will watch this recording. Aham Brahmasmi Taijin Tadoi. So I honor you from my highest divine self to your highest divine self. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just be doing this on people who I have permission from a higher self level from. So anybody who from a higher self level I don't have permission to be doing an aura clearing, you can disconnect. So for everyone who I do have permission to be doing an aura clearing, it's requested in line with Gaia's law in the higher realms of divine love that in this clearing, each person is cleared of all of their highest priority auric attachments and all unintended creations. Aham Brahmasmi Abrahadabra. So I'm going to activate the auric override code on each person's 4 brain centers, their 15 chakras, and their DNA template. And we're going to activate those to their highest energy holding potential and original divine function now, effectively clearing out all discarnates in each person's field, all occupants in each person's 15 chakra system, closing all portals and all wormholes, and clearing away all the related ids and issues of all of those auric problems now. Aham Brahmasmi Taijin Tadoi. And so what's happening is Kim's obviously getting an auric clearing right now as I'm doing this, because she's one of the people who's obviously watching and part of this recording. And then, so people may be going through somewhat kind of a release right now. You may be feeling some energy coming in. What's happening is there's a lot of the highest priority blockages within people's energy field that are leaving right now. And the very first thing that I take away is entities within people's field. And that can be a kind of an odd one. There's a lot of kind of dead people and relatives and people hanging around that, we don't have a very good system at this point of helping the dead cross over. We're very terrible at that in the West. We basically have nothing. And so anybody that kind of stays stuck on the earthly plane, which is a very, very common thing, they attach into people's fields. And often when people come in for their first session, come in what I call cold, people can sometimes have 4, 5, and 6 entities in their field. They're like a walking party, basically. And these are very negative energy producing, confused, frightened, frightful, kind of disembodied spirits, so to speak. And then, after the weirdness of getting those out of people, so, everybody's chakra system gets blockages over it. And when I say blockages, everything's composed of subconscious identities. And it's the idea that the subconscious part of you is the bigger, way more powerful piece of you. These numbers aren't exactly right, but I read recently the subconscious mind processes something like 11 million bits of information per second, and the conscious mind processes something like 17.
Wow.
So it's like our conscious mind is like this fumbling 2-bit computer that can only handle a couple things at a time, while we have subconsciously this supercomputer that's running all these programs all the time. Mm-hmm. And very often a lot of these programs are not in our highest good. And we develop subconscious identities about ourselves from the second we're born. And we're like, Mom, can I have that? And she's like, no. And you start developing an identity of unworthiness about yourself, even if it was just a miscommunication. Right? Not all these things are always intended. We get hurt because we misinterpret things, right? And then we ingrain that into our field, in our subconscious. And all these blockages come together in whole conglomerates that block energy centers within our body. And so I'm, again, now pulling off any of those blockages that everybody's higher self acknowledges are in their highest good to come out. And then I also closed up things that I just term as portals and wormholes. You can call them whatever you want. You're going to hear a lot of different terminology come out in the future about the same stuff. And that those are simply just tears in your auric field. So most people's auric field is not this completely sovereign, contained energy field. It's actually got all these slits in it, these weak spots, so to speak, where you can lose energy out of through oftentimes thought forms that are created by you, but then most often is where other people are then hooked into your energy. And so then as you're closing up that energy field from each person, they're maintaining a much higher frequency contained energy field where they're not losing energy all the time to other people and to their own thought forms. And so I'm sealing up all of that stuff. And I know it can be odd to say I'm, sealing up this stuff and I'm really just here talking to you and it doesn't, and, it's the idea that I'm a facilitator between you and your higher self. So I'm not beaming cosmic energy into you. I'm not, people talk about doing energy work and they talk about getting exhausted through energy work. And that doesn't happen to me. And I can work on thousands of people at a time without it being draining on me, simply because I'm not using my own energy. I'm letting everybody be doing this to themselves. And it's the idea that people have always been able to get in touch with their higher self. Again, it just used to mean going and meditating in a cave in India for 30 years, and you would hear about people reaching states of enlightenment, of grounding in their own higher self at bigger and bigger levels, right? Reaching higher and higher states of enlightenment, higher understandings. And that we're just at a more advanced, rapid time on Earth, where facilitators are going to be used. And the idea that, when I do a session with you, Kim, I connect into your higher self. So anyway, well, that's what I use to connect into people's higher selves. There's a lot done through hands. Our hands are very powerful. The left hand in particular is a very direct connector to higher self. And I do tend to teach that to anybody that comes and works with me, because it's a very helpful paradigm of understanding that's going to really help humanity start to really get in touch with their higher selves, by themselves. And, so I'm just connected into people's higher selves, and then I'm just saying, go clean the kitchen now, right?
Okay.
And you're doing all of the work to yourselves, right? And then I'm like, well, how's the bathroom look? And they're like, oh, it needs to get scrubbed. And I'm like, okay, clean the bathroom now.
Okay.
And then the higher self goes in, and the idea is that actually, all of your own higher selves are your own healers and your own activators, right? And that, the whole point of coming to me is that at a certain point, you never need my channel or my energy again, right? You come to me and you do enough, you're going to get set up to where you can be doing all this clearing on yourself. You can be activating yourself, your family, your friends, clients if you're interested. And it's very interesting in terms of many healers. If you were to say, teach me what you do, they would say, not in a million years could I teach you to do this intuitive thing at a higher self level that I do. And that this work is very teachable and easily passed on to people. And that, it's very early in the game, and I'm out here, doing a lot of this work, pretty early on, but that, it's not just going to be a couple special people that can be doing this work. This is a whole global shift that's going on. This shift is going on whether I'm here doing this work or not, right? And that's a very important part of helping people with this work, is that, this work is so powerful that some people sometimes get the shift confused with this work. Does that make sense? And I went through my levels of that as well, where this work felt to me like, oh, whatever people were kind of like waiting for on December 21st, I got with my first golden DNA activations. I was like not waiting for anything. I was like crown chakra open, like getting intense downloads, energy in my body just drastically different than anything I'd ever experienced. And so, this work provided some of those idealized experiences of what people kind of understand we might be going to. And that this work is just a hyper-accelerated way for people who are looking to really move to the highest frequency state possible they can at the moment. They will. And that going through this work is different than going through this work 2 years ago.
Right.
Because you're opening up in a different energy field.
Yeah.
Right?
My ceiling has changed.
Exactly. Your ceiling has changed. And I know, there's some people who have been doing this work since like 2002 for a long time, 10 or 11 years. And, they're just wonderful people. I've heard them kind of jokingly complain that, I spent 10 years meditating to like open my third eye a little bit, and now all you kids are coming in and stepping in, and 6 months later you're just like at these like super spiritual states that took most people years and years and years to get to.
And don't you think though that that's because it's so necessary?
Yes, absolutely. And we live on a planet where we just ended our second entire world war by dropping nuclear weapons on our own species. Right. We're not, and we've been at war since then, and people have, we talk about people, have trouble meditating for 3 hours a month. People have trouble, not doing crack in this world. There's a lot of really low-level stuff still going on, and that there's just so much help, and people are in therapy left and right, successful people on the outside, people that you would imagine have everything. There's still a certain spiritual thing missing. And I even, talk about the idea that, we almost have things inside of ourselves to engage in spirituality in the ways that we have opposable thumbs. And that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we have been a species that has engaged in spirit. And it's been very, very recent that we've been a species and a culture that have cut ourselves off from that. And that, the idea that we have engaged in ritualized, ceremonial, religious experiences as a species forever, basically. This much, and then this little much is how much we've known. And it's the idea that we've developed opposable thumbs through all our encounters and needing them, and that we've developed there's a place within us for spirituality, and that most people don't have that filled right now. Some people, sure, go smoke weed and go dance at a Grateful Dead concert.
Right. Nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's nothing wrong with anything.
Right. That's so true.
But that, it's like, why is there so much anxiety and depression? What is it that's so missing? We have everything. We have all our creature comforts. What is that inside people that's not okay? Right? What's missing? You need to kind of fill out people on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, or they're going to end up with some sort of problems.
And so this is work that facilitates really, sort of a quick access to spirit. And I think that for me, I was in that spot where my life was good on the outside, on paper. Everything is good. I have a great life, but I just couldn't feel it.
Yeah.
And I just, had a lot of angst around that. What's wrong with me? How come why don't I feel good? And then again, it wasn't until I started doing this work that I really felt like I'm becoming some sort of conduit for this energy. And I just want more of it. So I did the 5-session package, which I think included 2 DNA activations, right? So there was some clearing, and then the 2 activations. And then what would I do next?
What you would do next would be something that would be called, there's a whole lot of directions that you can be going. The next best step would be accessing something that I'm calling the Future is Now codes, which are a certain version of kind of like golden DNA activations from future timelines of myself.
Okay.
Which is maybe going to be an odd thing to start to get into a little bit now. But basically they are such high frequency codes that you really need to make sure that people have processed and gone through a level where they're ready to take them in.
So you think I'm ready?
What's that?
You think I'm ready?
Yes, okay. I would say that you're ready. And then we put people through those 5 steps to get them ready.
Cool.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We could certainly talk about that if you're interested.
Cool. Well, I want more. That's that's the thing about this stuff is you want more.
Yeah, I can't tell you. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars at this point, and that for me it was like once I realized this stuff and what it did, there was like nothing else that seemed worth any of that money.
Right.
It's like I could take some money and like go get myself activated to like a higher level of consciousness that's going to pervade throughout my entire life. In the most positive in lives, absolutely. In the uttermost positive, divine ways you could ever imagine. Or I can like go get some sushi and like I have a couple drinks and go see a concert.
Right.
And that, I personally, I spent a lot of money buying sessions for my family before I could facilitate this work, because it was even like, I can spend a couple $100 and have my entire family members all engaged in this higher level consciousness. And I was like, where do I sign up?
Right.
And it's just an odd shift when you start to really understand this work from an internal perspective, and it's not somebody on the outside saying, "Oh, this stuff's really amazing. Go use it." There's only so much understanding that you get. Just similar to somebody who's gonna take mushrooms to have a psychedelic internal, religious experience, where you could talk all you want about it, but that's just talking about it. That's not going and having that experience.
Right. So it's some suspending of your disbelief and its curiosity and its willingness to have the experience.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Peter, I have to watch my time. So, we tell people how they can reach you?
Yeah.
And how they can work with you?
Yeah, the best. So I have a Facebook page. I run a company called Your DNA Awakening. Again, that's Your DNA Awakening. And you can go look me up on Facebook under Your DNA Awakening. Or you can look me up on the internet at www.yourdnaawakening.com. And for people who are looking to access this work, what I've been shifting to mostly is actually group work, where I meet with people online in teleconference rooms. And I have a big presentation. It's very interactive and supportive, and that it's a more economic way for people to be accessing this work. And that I would put people through all 5 of those steps, plus much more. And you experienced when we did one-on-one sessions, we also pull up other codes, and we just do sort of as much energy work as that person can handle at that moment.
You're very generous that way. Thank you.
Sure. And that as well in those group sessions, each group session probably has about 4 to 5 energy exchanges through it, not just sort of one auric clearing. It would be an auric clearing, and then white light chakra cleanser, and then an abundance activation, and then all of these other things going on for you in that session. And then also you would receive all those recordings for life, so that you would actually then have those sessions for life, which is really an amazing thing. Because what happens then is if you feel like 6 months later, you're like, ooh, I could stand to, have another clearing. I'm feeling like some more gunk built up, you can just go watch that. And so I should maybe tell you right now, too, Kim, that anybody that's worked with me one-on-one in the past year or so, I'll be contacting eventually, and I'll be at least getting some recordings too.
Okay.
So they also, when people come work with me, they actually are going to be receiving that energy work for life whenever they're desiring it. You kind of take me out of the bottleneck, so to speak.
Cool.
And so, I charge $200 for one-on-one sessions, or I do the entire group work series for $196, or I charge $49 for each of those individuals, and then I do it at a discount of $196. And for the people who are watching the Spirit Primer, I can offer an even better deal where I'll offer access into the group work, so all 5 steps, plus a lot more energy work for $196, plus I'll throw in a free one-on-one session.
Ah, that's so great.
For anybody that's here watching this. And to access that, because this is just kind of a recording, the best way would just be writing me an email. Again, my name's Peter Rogan, and you can reach me, peter@yourdnaawakening.com, and just let me know you would be interested in the Spirit Primer deal. And then I can arrange that and send a link along that will allow people to be accessing that. And so my next group work actually starts on July 1st.
Perfect. That's so cool. And should we say, I'll leave it up to you, but there's probably a time limitation on how long they can get the special deal.
Sure.
And I'll post it on my Facebook page, and you can.
Okay.
And
let's just say maybe up till that next group session starts.
Okay.
Right. So anybody who's interested in getting into this next round, that deal will be open for.
Great. Peter, I'm going to sign off because we're way over time, but how do you talk about something as complex as this in a half an hour? I kind of suspected we would go over. And you're always so, again, generous with your time and information. And anybody that wants to do the work with Peter, you'll find, a lot of times the running of the codes doesn't take so long, but he's just so willing to talk and explain and process with you about what's going on for you and for your highest good. So for right now, it's Kim Thompson signing out with Peter Rogan and Spirit Primer, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you. Can't remember how to turn off my call recorder. There we go.